like to call tonight's regular council meeting to order. Recommendation that the agenda for the regular council meeting of March 9th, 2020 be adopted as presented. Moved by Councillor Ady, second by Councillor Reinhala. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Item 3A, recommendation that the minutes of the regular council meeting of February 24th, 2020 be adopted. Moved by Councillor Cunningham, second by Councillor Niche. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, first up, we have a petition and delegation from Allison Watson, Kate Toy, and Leanna Dragowska of Watson Projects regarding the presentation of the Child Care Assessment and Action Plan. Welcome. Some lazy boys. You can just press that button for the mic there as well.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Allison Watson, and I'm a community planner just from down the road in Smithers, and I had the pleasure of working with the project team and your city staff on the Prince Rupert Child Care Assessment and Action Plan. Kate Toy, who many of you know, is also on our project team and was the community lead for this project. Sure.
And I would just like to acknowledge that we are on the unceded traditional territory of the Tsimshian people, and we're very grateful that we get to do this presentation on this land. Thank you.
Great. So tonight what I'd like to do is just walk you through a high-level overview of the child care plan and some of its key findings. Before I do that, I'd also like to give a little bit of a backstory on childcare, because a lot's changed in recent years. So before going into the plan, something to consider is childcare as critical social infrastructure, and also acknowledging it's quite complex. So by social infrastructure, I mean just like housing being available to community, childcare can mean the difference of people leaving your community and families choosing to relocate here, or families being able to stay here. So in that sense, it's really shifting to be in community planning a fundamental building block or precursor to healthy community development. And my background's in municipal planning, and this is something that's very new. And I'm sure some of you may have felt a little bit uncomfortable going into this process, like many communities have, but I do commend you for taking this step, because it is an up-and-coming issue that communities are experiencing. The complexity piece really comes from childcare largely being left to private groups or individuals to be a market-based system with really no government involvement in it. So in recent years, this is changing because of the shortfalls we're seeing in communities and a push to a universal child care system. So federal government, provincial government are realizing that there's critical shortages in communities, and it's meaning that people can't find work, they have to leave communities, or they can't move to communities. So the system's changing. The provincial government has their own child care plan, and they're looking to local governments to identify their own needs. And this is what this plan does. So there's really three questions that we looked at in this process. The first was to look at what are the current child care needs in Prince Rupert. The second was how many spaces are required. And the third action or item was to look at actions the city can take to support space creation. The process to get here moved from a comprehensive background collection where we looked at what the city has done, your policies, your bylaws, as well as what's already happened in the community. We had an extensive community engagement piece carried out by Kate, This included 2 different surveys, numerous one-on-one interviews, as well as a child participation activity where we had over 70 submissions. There was a data collection piece which involved a local inventory and also looking at projected child population statistics over the next 10 years. This was then all brought together into the analysis piece, carried forward into a draft, which was then referred out to community, and then now we have a draft or a final plan completed. So despite an almost doubling of childcare programs in Prince Rupert over the last 10 years, there's still a number of critical gaps that need to be addressed now or looked at closely now in order to have I would maybe use, the type of growth that's anticipated in the community. So these 5 key gaps are infant toddler spaces. So while space shortages were identified through a variety of different childcare types, infant and toddler center spaces were a critical shortage. And when you look at the comparisons of Northwest and BC utilization rates, infant toddler in Prince Rupert just essentially it literally blows off the charts. Like there's nothing available.
And I would add to that, I would love to add to infant toddler space is when you think of it, you might think you only have an infant and you don't have space for an infant, but what this does mean is parents could have multiple drop-offs, so they can find a spot, if they're lucky enough to find a spot for their infant or toddler, they're going to one place and then their other children are able to go to another space, so this isn't keeping families together.
Thanks, Kate. The second gap was around the lack of flexible programs. So there were maybe 1 or 2 programs that offered extended hours. Other than that, childcare is limited to your traditional Monday to Friday work hours, which doesn't work for shift workers, overnight workers, anyone not working those hours. And I would also add, with the movement of people and families, we no longer have those networks, especially of new people moving here, of the aunt or the friend. Like, you don't have your established networks to make a plan for your kids. So the result is you can't go. The third gap was around the need to look at childcare in hubs. So by hubs, I mean in schools, multifamily residential, recreation, because the majority of childcare is located in residential neighborhoods in single program types. The fourth gap was an awareness piece. So where do families go to find resources on childcare, as well as some of the great affordability benefits that are available to families now. The fifth gap was identifying some of the barriers to creating childcare spaces. So predominantly this was a staff shortage, and this isn't just a Prince Rupert issue, it's a across the board province shortage of staff. But you can't operate if you don't have staff. So a major challenge. Zoning was identified as a hindrance to creating spaces, but also local capacity. So even if the space was available, is there capacity for an operator to come on board and operate those spaces? So the next project question was to look at how many spaces are required. So based on current BC Stats projections and an incremental increase of the current access rate, there's a shortage of about 49 spaces. And this is a very conservative estimate by comparison to the different methodologies out there. So this is the point in time right now, but as you're well aware, this is a community in transition and the future could look very different. So I'll speak to this again in the next section, but these targets will need to shift and change according to the actual pace of growth and ongoing community dialogue. So looking at actions the city can take. So this section is really we've got 4 key action areas and then some ideas on the different actions the city can take. And what's really important to highlight is that this isn't essentially dumping the responsibility on childcare on the city. It's not like that at all. These things are little or no cost, and really we looked at piggybacking on initiatives and programs that are already underway or upcoming in the future. So we're putting on the lens of childcare glasses and saying, okay, so what's the opportunity in this? And this really is a pivot point in this process where we go from a needs assessment or a deficit-based approach to looking at what is the opportunity in childcare in Prince Rupert and how can we as a community work together to address these challenges. And that's really a key piece. So the first area is to look at strengthening childcare policy. And I must say Prince Rupert as a community has excellent policy around families and past work in the community, but including some stronger childcare policies will add childcare in the discussion on future growth and management or future growth and development decisions. So your upcoming OCP review is a great opportunity to include childcare in these conversations. Large-scale development projects or redevelopment projects that are underway are a great opportunity to ask the question, is there an opportunity for childcare? Or how could multiple objectives be addressed in a certain situation? And in here is also a reminder about the importance of keeping track of stats and numbers and metrics. And the plan has some very simple data points to recheck in that are easily available from the Ministry of Children and Families and also Northern Health. So it's not creating a lot of extra data work. We've already done that. It's just about plugging in a couple metrics. The second area is to look at updating your regulations and create incentives. So good news is you already have these bylaws. So the first is your zoning bylaw, and really just looking at clarifying regulations on where childcare can be developed. And so the idea of just mirroring some language you have around educational facilities, looking at, I guess, updating one of the regulations that currently limits the number of children who can access a support worker, as well as a revitalization tax exemption on new childcare facilities. You do have a bylaw right now, but this is a bigger project to think about in the future. The third area is around supporting space creation through direct and indirect ways, depending on how council wishes to proceed. This plan in and of itself you've already done something. You've showed leadership in your community. This document can be picked up by any organization and used to support their applications to secure funding. There's also very attractive funding available right now should the city choose to proceed with a Catalyst project in the future, whereby they could apply for the funding to either build new or renovate a space to be then leased to a childcare operator. The fourth and final action or strategy area is around communication, partnerships, and advocacy. I think it's a thread that flows through any action plan. And a few of the highlights of the key ideas are following the plan completion to bring together into a focus group the players in the community who have expressed interest in applying for the space creation funding to get the next rollout steps underway, including information and any civic marketing campaigns you might be rolling out, as well as developing resources for future families moving here to the community, or childcare startups, because there's also funding available for that. So Veronica has actually already put together I would say a 99% complete document on that quite quickly. And then the final piece of this is an advocacy piece. So I'm sure you'll have people from the BC Child Coalition coming to council in the future, but it's basically to be the voice of your community to provincial government, because there's a lot of big issues in childcare that can't be addressed at the local level. So to advocate for continued momentum at the provincial and federal levels to move towards increasing access to funding, affordability, space creation. There's a whole host of steps that they're taking. Did you want to add anything on those?
I would just, when Allison and I were speaking, we just started talking about the lens of equity and how childcare really supports a community through the lens of equity. Whether you are a male-female home, one parent usually stays home, and it's usually the woman. So an equity lens allows more women to be back in the workforce. And also the equity lens of space creation throughout our community, so that transportation isn't a barrier, cost isn't a barrier, and it just really brings a level playing field for more of our community members.
So the final content slide here is just a little reminder and recap on the funding that's available right now. So it's extremely aggressive and attractive. The province wants to see spaces being developed. So there's $3 million, and that's 100% funding to all public sector organizations and Indigenous government. So that's the city, that's schools, that's post-secondary, public post-secondary institutions, to construct spaces. And there's also additional funding all the way down to private corporations and businesses. UBCM also has up to $1 million available. They're just revamping their program. They should be rolling that out again. And that can be used, that's only for municipalities, but that can be used to piggyback on the New Spaces Fund to even purchase land, which is interesting when you start to connect the dots between your asset management planning and your goals around economic development. So that's for a larger conversation in your circle. But I would conclude with congratulating the community for completing this. There's not a lot of communities in the north that have chosen to complete childcare plans. And I would also encourage you to ask, what if? What if childcare was an opportunity to capitalize on in distinguishing Prince Rupert and being a place where families can access childcare? Nobody's thinking about it. We're all trying as small communities to kind of do very similar things to attract people, but no one's doing childcare. And if anyone can get childcare right, it could be amazing. So thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Awesome, thank you. That's great, actually. Questions from council? Councilor Renaud.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for your presentation. Yeah, I know we have like 4 people working like 24 hours there, and they were looking for 24 hours child care support, and I think this study will help us, our community, to go forward. Thank you.
Councilor Ady.
Yeah, thanks, and I appreciate how much work goes into putting something like that together, and it's really a first-class product. And having that plan obviously is very helpful, but I think there is a way in which the variety of things that the city is doing in terms of managing growth and development, it's kind of a reminder to keep that piece in that conversation. And I think from that perspective, it's going to be very useful.
Other questions from council? Yep.
I just have one question on the handout that you gave us here around the metrics that you were using. What does the access rate imply? You said that you're looking to achieve a 25% access rate for children 0 to 12.
Yeah, so access rate is a metric that's used by, Ministry of Children and Families uses it, and it's basically equates to like 21 children out of 100 right now in Prince Rupert, age 0 to 12, have access to a childcare space. The average in northern or northwestern BC is actually a little bit lower. I think it's 18. The provincial average is 17, but the leading area is 24%. But the thing to remember with access rate, it's a crude measurement. It doesn't tell the whole story. So when you start to layer on utilization rates, which is how well used spaces are, then Prince Rupert, in the actual plan document you'll see, but Prince Rupert basically is higher. Like there's the spaces are better used and there's less vacancies in Prince Rupert spaces. But in terms of tracking over time to use something like an access rate that MCFD just publishes every year, all you need to do is re-click on their website and you get it.
Other questions?
Just a comment. Thank you for your advocacy and dedication, and for putting this presentation together. I think that identifying these gaps and finding tangible solutions that we as a municipality can help with making these things happen. I think anything that we can do to support this, that I obviously am in favor of, and I appreciate that. Having daughters myself, with the challenge of accessibility for care has been. We've fortunately lucked out with after school care, but for having our day end at 2:45 sharp every day, not many work days kind of allow for that. So for me, beneficial for myself being self-employed, and then with council and things like that, there are ways to balance it, but that's not the case for every family. A lot of families are the 9 to 5s and they have to work around this somehow, and not as many employers are as, I guess, how would you say, lenient with those kinds of things. So someone would have to take a sacrifice and a hit to their income. So I think that having these affordable and accessible care facilities is definitely a priority and something that we can get behind.
Councillor Cunningham.
Thanks again for your time. But the question I have is, how widespread is it to get available training for childcare? Is it Northwest College, but just in certain centers, or is it at every Northwest College?
Training is a huge issue, as is the pay of early childhood educators. It's a 2-year program, and you come out with usually just above minimum wage, if not minimum wage. So that is a huge barrier. That is where advocacy can come into place as to why early childhood educators need to be paid on par with educational assistants or even higher. I know that the Coast Mountain is currently looking to run a ECE program, as is the Metlakatla Training Center. It's just getting people to buy in that putting 2 years in for a wage that is not that great is where we need to do a lot of advocacy work.
So when they come out and are introduced to this very low wage, is there any subsidies the government has? None whatsoever. So the government's got this big push for childcare, but in no way wants to subsidize the wages to encourage people to go into that vocation.
And I can share, as you probably all know, the government's committed $1 billion to childcare, and wage increase is on the table. They are looking at $1 to $2 per year, but places such as Early Childhood Educators of BC, the BC Aboriginal Childcare Society, they're all advocating for a higher wage, and we can all have a role in that.
You know, I think the caution there is, you know, it's fine and dandy to put the wages up and that, but then all of a sudden childcare goes up, and then it gets more difficult for people to make both ends meet at the same time. Whereas if the government set in with all that money and put it towards some wages of that, it might be beneficial to more people wanting to use the service.
Right, and the $1 billion actually is to support the plan, which puts a cap on how much childcare costs per day, with maximum being of $10 per day max, and increasing early childhood wages. So it wouldn't increase, a wage doesn't increase the cost of childcare to the families.
Other questions? Well, great. Thank you so much for your time and for all that energy and effort you've put into this. And we have a great, tremendous opportunity through our OCP update to implement new policies. I know that there's a few projects emerging right now as a result of this in the community, and I'm fairly confident that Rupert's going to be taking a huge leadership role, and we certainly want to be part of that.
And I would also just thank the city staff, specifically Veronica, for your great work and support on this project. You got a heavy hitter over here, so yeah, it's great.
Thank you, Veronica, as well. Thank you. Yep, you're good. Oh, that's okay. She'll take care of that. Okay, next up, we have our budget consultation period here. Another presentation from our Chief Financial Officer, and then there'll be a opportunity for the public to comment on the 2020 budget.
All right, good evening, and thank you for attending or watching from home our first of 2 public consultations on the 2020 budget. Staff presented the 2020 municipal budget on February 24th. We will be showing a snapshot of that presentation for the purpose of public engagement and feedback at this public consultation. Council will listen to the comments and questions from the public as a part of their deliberation of this year's budget bylaws. After the presentation, people are asked to approach the microphone and either ask their question or provide their comments. However, before we start talking about the budget, we would like to show the viewers here and at home a short video put together by our communications manager, which is a snapshot of some of the city's achievements in 2019. Thank you, Veronica. So we hope the previous video was informative. Now we will recap some of the information originally presented to Council on February 24th. After taking into account the expected revenues and expenses, the city is happy to present a budget surplus for the second year in a row. This means no increase to the property tax rate. This surplus has enabled us to propose an increase to the paving budget, taking it up 100% from last year to $1 million, and incorporate the remainder of the expected loan repayment on the new RCMP detachment. This year's allocation combined with the allocation last year means the expected cost of the loan is completely covered. This project has been on our to-do list for nearly a decade. We are very pleased that we will soon be able to start this project with no anticipated impact to taxpayers. On the far right column in yellow are the proposed municipal mill rates for 2020. They are compared to the 2019 mill rates in blue. You will note the rate has decreased for residents. This is because assessed values have increased. We adjust the rate to account for this market change to assessed values. The mill rate is only a multiplier applied to the assessed value to arrive at a dollar figure. To calculate the impact to a property owner of the recommended mill rate, one needs to compare the 2019 combined general property tax to the amount calculated for 2020. The 2019 combined general property tax can be found on the 2019 property tax notice as shown in the red circles. These are the only categories council can decide on. All the rest of the tax levies are either set by another authority or calculated based on assessed values in Prince Rupert to pay the bill the city has sent. The formula to calculate the general levy is on this slide. Property owners can take their current assessment multiplied by the proposed municipal mill rate to learn the municipal portion of their tax bill. When compared to the 2019 combined general property tax as found on the previous slide, owners will be informed whether their taxes have gone up or down. Here we have provided the effect to a homeowner with an average assessed value in both 2019 and 2020. The proposed mill rate results in no change for a residential property owner with an average assessed value home in both years. This slide shows the projected daily cost for the average homeowner in 2020. For example, every day an average household will contribute $4.43 per day to access all municipal services excluding utilities. This translates into $1.73 for all protective services, 54 cents for roads and sidewalks, 71 cents for parks and recreation, 31 cents for community services grants, and 27 cents for airport access, to name 80% of the tax-funded services. As mentioned on a previous slide, the proposed residential mill rate is lower than last year. To show in real dollars the effect this has on a homeowner, provided the value of their home stayed the same, we've created the following table. This table is in a range of dollar values where the majority of residential assessed value levels exist. For simplicity, we have separated them in $50,000 increments. For example, if a homeowner's value in 2019 was $200,000, the 2019 municipal taxes paid were $1,200. At the proposed 2020 rate, the taxes are $1,172, or $28 less than in 2019. We have created this visual for viewers to see where their tax dollars are expected to be spent in 2020. The largest allocations are to RCMP at 23%, fire at 15%, recreation at 12%, roads and sidewalks at 12%, and grants at 7%. These 5 categories make up 69% of the services funded through taxation. It is expected that changes to the proposed mill rates are likely given it is tied to assessed values. BC Assessment will release the revised roll March 31st, which will take into account any appeals to assessed value. Any reductions to assessed values may impact the proposed mill rates. Given that property taxes are not tied to ability to pay, homeowners should familiarize themselves with available programs that may offer some relief for those that qualify. The provincial government offers residents the homeowner grant and the tax deferral program. These programs are available to reduce property taxes paid, and defer the tax payments through a loan that is recovered at the time of sale. Please contact City Hall for details of each program or look on your property tax notice. Want to know more about how tax rates are calculated? We have a video available on our website under City Hall. In the drop-down menu, click Property Taxes. It is also available on YouTube. Search Property Taxes Prince Rupert. For residents who aren't present at tonight's meeting, you can obtain informational documents and participate in a survey on Rupert Talks. You can register at engage.princerupert.ca to participate and find the city's proposed 5-year financial plan document, frequently asked questions, the video mentioned in the last slide explaining taxation, and other resources. Results from the survey are anonymous and will be aggregated and shared with Council as part of the budget process. Paper copies of the survey will be available at City Hall, the Recreation Complex, and the library. Thank you for listening to our presentation. We will have another public consultation opportunity on Monday, March 23rd at 7 p.m. in Council Chambers located in City Hall. Comments and questions can also be received through email at finance@princerupert.ca. Thank you.
Thank you. And great video. Okay, so now we would call up any members of the public that would like to come to talk about the 2020 budget. Welcome.
Okay. Will the video that you just played, is it going to be online? Because that was a good video, but it was going so fast you really couldn't comprehend the figures and stuff like that. So is it going to be online?
Yes.
Okay. The secondly was, and people have asked me, and I don't know, where's the new RCMP building supposed to be built? Some people, it was the tot lot, and then someone thought it was up by the Highliner, or maybe I have it. Yeah. So do we know where it's going to be built?
It's yet to be determined presently.
Okay, you do. If it were going to be the one up by the Highliner, and those guys heard right, you have to own the property, don't you?
Any place that we put the RCMP building would have to be city-owned land, yes.
Okay. The other thing I'd like to see done over the, and this is just a generic one, I'd like to see that we give numbers, and I can show you from annual report from several years back where it would say we gave 723 parking tickets, type thing, and parking tickets don't get me off on that. The other thing I'd like to know is how much money, and will it be in the, there's 3 or 4 or 5 levels, at least 3 levels of the budget, and some of them are much more detailed than the one we get on handed out here. So I was wondering how much money approximately is for council travel uses, etc., and how is that approved? And the reason I'm almost bringing that up is because I saw it in the Terraces minutes where they had the mayor going someplace, and it said it cost, the city gave this amount of money, and it was just in the minutes, and it was approved, etc. We used to do that kind of thing, but now it's sort of just tossed in. And so where is that money that, because I can remember in previous years, the mayors and that used to just travel everywhere to up their salary. So one would say. So where is that money?
The travel is included in the governance section of the department, and it is always based on what was allocated in the previous year.
What do you mean the governance of the department? So
There is, if you look at the report to council that was provided on February the 24th, if you look at the back in attachment A, there is department revenues and there's department expenditures, and then expenditures, there's a line item called governance, and it's included within that particular department. And again, it's based on the travel that was incurred in the previous year.
okay, and going back, how is it approved that I'm gonna travel someplace, how do we approve it? Used to be council would approve it, or,
The dollar value is included in the budget, and within that dollar value, dependent on whatever council's priorities are, for instance, if the mayor goes down and meets with a minister, as long as it's within the approved budget, as per the bylaw, then it is okay for him to go and advocate for the community in that fashion.
okay, so it doesn't take someone else signing off, or it's just with it, if it's up to him to decide it's within the limits type thing.
It's not up to him, it's within the approved bylaw, and there is sign-off for anybody's travel.
Okay, thank you, I'm sorry, I should have came better prepared.
Thank you. Any other members of the public who'd like to come speak to the budget? Okay, seeing none, I'd end the public comment period for the 2020 budget. There'll be another one at our next council meeting as well for another opportunity for the public to come speak to council regarding the budget. So we'll be moving on now to reports. First up is a report from our Director of Operations regarding the landfill leachate lagoon project award. Welcome back.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hello, Council. So the recommendation tonight is that Mayor and Council approve the recommendations of the Director of Operations and Sperling Hansen, which is the engineer of record for the landfill, and award the leachate lagoon contract to Broadwaters Industries. The Prince Rupert landfill has been operating under its existing footprint for many years. As you know, unfortunately, the footprint is almost completely exhausted. The landfill must expand, and it must expand now. The purpose of this tender was to seek proposals to find a qualified contractor to construct a leachate lagoon. This lagoon is an integral part of expansion that needs to be constructed first in order to take the leachate once the cell is constructed. So we put out an RFP. We received 5 compliant bids based on the results of the evaluation and the recommendation of our engineer of record and our staff. We would like to award to Broadwater Industries for $1,929,179 plus GST. They were the lowest bid, they were compliant, and they have good experience at our landfill completing work there in the past. All of the tenders came in under the capital budget expenses which we put forward, so it is on budget. There's no overages associated with that. And additionally, as always, the engineering and operations department will work with the preferred contractor to look for efficiencies throughout the project. So in conclusion, we're looking for a recommendation and a resolution to award to Broadwater Industries. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any questions from council? Yep. Oh, so moved by Councillor Moreau that Mayor and Council approve the recommendations of the Director of Operations and Sperling and Hansen and award the landfill leachate lagoon contract to Broadwater Industries, seconded by Councillor Skelton Morvan. Discussion?
Just want to say thanks very much for your hard work on this. It's always appreciated when you can make a decision a lot easier when it's lowest cost, local bidder, below budget, local with experience, engineer recommendation and staff recommendation. And that checks all the boxes. So thanks very much for your hard work on this.
Thank you.
I have nothing else to add to that. That's you said it all. Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Council.
Okay, next, report from our Chief Financial Officer regarding the elector approval for loan authorization bylaws.
Thank you. At the February 24th regular meeting, 2 loan authorization bylaws, one for the water dam replacement and one for the new landfill cell, were introduced and given 3 readings by council. The bylaws are now with the provincial government for review and approval before they may go to the next step of elector approval prior to adoption. While we wait for the return of the bylaws from the province, staff is seeking direction on how approval will be sought in order to make preparations. The community charter specifies how a loan authorization bylaw may obtain elector approval before it can be considered by council for adoption. There are 2 ways, either assent, also referred to as a referendum, or the alternate approval process. A referendum requires a question to be voted on with a simple majority deciding. Voting eligibility is the same for voting at a municipal election, with the cost associated for the referendum being similar at around $35,000. Voting day needs to occur within 80 days of provincial approval of the bylaws. The alternate approval process requires a public notification of the intent to borrow funds and a time period for voting members of the community to state their opposition. The process takes 6 weeks from first public notification. If more than 10% of eligible voters state their opposition, then the matter proceeds to a referendum. The cost of the alternate approval process is estimated at $7,000. By choosing which process elector approval is sought, staff can proceed through the loan authorization process required to obtain necessary funding for the Woodworth Dam replacement project and the new landfill cell project. Thank you.
Thanks. And just a procedural question: would you need two motions, one for each loan, or can it be one motion for both loans?
I think to keep it nice and clean, let's do two.
So to even be more clear, then we would do two motions, each one directing whether it's going to be an alternative approval process or a referendum.
Yes, and then we could come back, if it's a referendum, we could come back and indicate a single voting day, that sort of thing, and then combine it in the same spot.
Okay. And just so we're all on the same page as well, the first would be the loan authorization for the dam, and then the second one would be for the, I'm drawing a blank.
The landfill.
Landfill, right. I was thinking the water for some reason. Okay. Okay, so I would entertain a motion then to direct staff to proceed containing elector approval by way of alternative approval process for the dam authorization loan. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Cunningham. Discussion?
I'm definitely in support of the alternative approval. I just feel that going through the process of having basically almost like an election, we find the turnouts at elections are low already, and I feel that the turnouts at something like this would be even lower. And I feel that it's cost savings we can save by doing it, and if there is a group of people that are really against doing this, then they can make their campaign to get people to sign against doing it this way. But I feel that this is a lot more streamlined, and we'll be able to move ahead on these projects a lot faster, which is basically going to save us money also. And these are projects that need to get done, whether if we do the alternate process and that fails, well, then we're just going to have to go to a voting system anyways. So I think we should move forward with the alternate approval process.
And I'll just quickly add too, I think the difference in this case is that thanks to the hard work we've been doing, is that we're able to cover these loans without impacting taxpayers. And I think it would be a different question if we were having to significantly increase taxes by 10+% type of thing to cover these types of payments. So, and we're not in that position. So I think I would agree with Councillor Niche.
I would just like to remind everyone listening that the bylaw right now for the water dam replacement doesn't have any increase in water rates for the water dam. All of the loan payments are going to be are anticipated to be paid by leases from Watson Island. And equally with the new landfill cell, all of the loan payments are to be paid out of existing fees. There's already fees being allocated towards the West Berm expansion, etc., in the existing cell. And since the existing cell would be closed, those fees would just be transferred over to repaying the debt on the new cell. So there's no increase anticipated there either.
Councillor Cunningham, good? Okay.
No, you said exactly what I wanted to say. I just wanted the taxpayers to know this is not impacting their taxes at all. And I thank Corinne and the financial department for making that clear.
Other comments? Okay. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, next, make a motion that council directs staff to proceed obtaining elector approval by way of alternative approval process for the landfill expansion project, or loan authorization. Moved by Counselor, I'll move it, seconded by Counselor Cunningham. Okay, other discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, does that, those motions satisfy the requirements? Okay. Next, I believe we have a report from our city planner regarding the development variance permit at 953 8th Avenue East. Welcome back.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's always a pleasure. The first report is for the property located at 953 Avenue East, which is on the overhead projector highlighted. This variance permit is for a garage. This picture dates back to 2012. At that time, it still had an old house and a garage. There will be a new house built here, and a garage will be in the rear. The variance is for the height from 3.6 meters to 5.4 meters. The variance has both aesthetic and functional values. From the functional values, it will avoid a flat roof, always a good thing to do. And from the aesthetic values, it will match the new house roof pitch. Public notifications were distributed following the February 24 regular council meeting. As of the date of this report, no comments were received, no written comments were received. And consequently, staff did not receive any objections that would prevent approval of this variance. That concludes my report, Mr. Mayor.
Great, thank you. Any questions from council? Okay, recommendation that the development variance permit application DP 2002 for the property located at 953 8th Avenue East proceed to final consideration. Moved by Councilor Randhawa, second by Councilor Morrow. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, next we have the development variance permit application for 1037 7th Avenue East.
The location of the property is on the overhead projector, and it's highlighted in red. The development variance permit is to reduce it's already existing non-conforming, to further reduce the front property setback on the easterly side to 3 meters, on the westerly side to 2.9 meters from the minimum of 3.6 meters. This will allow this older and very small house to increase its footprint. Public notifications were distributed following the February 24th regular council meeting as a date of its report, and indeed today, 4:30, we did not receive any written comments. Consequently, the staff did not receive any objections that would prevent approval of this variance. And that concludes my report, Mr. Mayor.
Great. Recommendation that the development variance permit application DP 2004 for the property located 1037 7th Avenue East proceed to final consideration. Moved by Councilor Skelton Morvan, second by Councilor Niche. Discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, another one. We have the development variance permit at 735 5th Avenue West.
Great. This application is to vary front property setback from 3.6 meter to 0 lot line. The proposal is to construct a new open deck as illustrated on the right-hand side. I have also included a different aerial photograph. This is the subject property here to illustrate that the sort of the nonconformity that exists in that location. Just out of curiosity, I looked at when this building was constructed. It was in 1913. The deck will not affect the off-street parking currently provided and will not interfere with the sidewalk or traffic on Fifth Avenue West. The proposed renovation should not affect the streetscape either. Public notifications were issued following February 24, 2020 regular council meeting. As of the date of this report, no written comments were received, and indeed as at 4:30 today. Subsequently, staff did not receive any objections that would prevent the approval of this application. And that concludes my report, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Recommendation that the development variance permit application DP 2005 for the property located at 735 Fifth Avenue West proceed to final consideration. Moved by Councilor Ranahawa, second by Councilor Ady. Question? Yep.
This is a question, it's not necessarily this specific application, but I'm wondering, it's obvious based on this photo that the zero lot line is common in this particular neighborhood, being one of the older neighborhoods in town. I'm wondering if you can speak to, is this type of variance to the zero lot line common community-wide, like with a lot of existing non-conforming?
I think we had only one similar zero lot line application. It just kind of triggers my memory, but I can't really recall. It is not common. In this situation, actually, it doesn't really interfere with the sidewalk, which would be probably one of the fears that I would have, or interfere with the street traffic and on-street parking.
Other discussion?
Just one question. How far from the sidewalk is this actually going to be?
Well, it's going to be right here. So if we, by estimating how far from the sidewalk this is going to be, I wasn't prepared for this question. I'm usually prepared for everything. I would suggest that by looking at this aerial photograph, there will be something in a neighborhood of perhaps 6 to 8 feet. That's only an estimate. I will take a look at it and confirm it for you.
I'm just curious because there's hardly any space there to begin with, and if you, it's hard to read the measurements, but it looks like 10.8, 10.9 coming out from the house.
The
and
yeah.
So you know, Wade might be able, Councillor Niche might be able to answer this better, but that's almost past the stairs already.
I'm not sure what the question is, but the house is 10 feet from the property line. The aerial photographs are often deceiving because of the angle that the picture was taken. So, but by measurements, it's 10 feet from the property line.
Well, the neighbors have no objections.
No.
Councilor Niche?
I mean, if I had to look at that aerial photograph that you had on there before that, and this is showing 10.9 feet to the property line, that's a bigger section. So I'd say you're probably at least 12 feet from where the deck would be built to the sidewalk, if I had to take a guess. So, I mean, and if you look at all the other property lines, they're lined up with the front of the houses already, so they would be basically similar to the rest of the houses. So,
6 feet, 12 feet.
Yeah.
These pictures are often distorted, and it depends on the angle that were taken from the satellite or whatever.
Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, last up, we have a development variance permit application for 659 8th Avenue East.
This is a new development variance permit application. The property is highlighted in red. The variance is for the front property setback it's already existing non-conforming, to further reduce it to 4.8 feet from the property line. The variance application is expressed on a picture. It would look something like this. It would essentially replace the existing stairs and increase the landing, would be essentially be increasing or would be extended into a covered porch. The proposed renovation has functional aesthetic value. It should not be intrusive of the neighborhood. Function is replacing the steps and increasing the landing to a covered porch, and it will also improve the curb appeal of this property. And in conclusion, Mr. Mayor, the applicant requires approval to proceed to public notification.
Okay, recommendation that the development variance permit application DP 20, is it 2005 as well? As the last one?
DP 2006.
06, right? Yeah, okay. 06 for the property located at 659 8th Avenue East. Proceed to public notification. Moved by Councillor Ady, second by Councillor Moreau. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, any reports, questions, or inquiries from members of council? Councillor Randhawa, then Councillor Ady.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just like to congratulate Rainmakers team, their coaches and parents for repeating the provincial championship again. So make us all proud for that. Thank you.
Steal your thunder.
I might have mentioned it, but I echo your congratulations. Good for the boys and good for the coaches and good for the school. I just wanted to comment on the meeting that was put together for the people that were looking at being renovicted from the Pinecrest buildings. I wanted to comment on, first of all, what an emotional meeting it was, and it really brought home, to me at least, that some of the decisions that get made that seem cut and dried and on paper simple sometimes involve people's lives. So listening to the emotional comments of the people there and the way in which they felt that they were being affected was very moving. I also want to acknowledge Paul Lagasse for taking on the task of pulling that together and providing the information to them that they did. And I am hopeful that that meeting of minds is going to lead to hopefully some ways to make that situation easier for the residents.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, and I'll just add to that, Councillor Cunningham and myself were also there, and it was definitely one of the hardest things I've done so far as mayor, for sure, after 5.5 years of being here. And we do have a housing issue here in the community, there's no doubt about it, and we're going to be working around the clock to help be as supportive as possible. The good news is that the developer has worked with Paul, and they've been able to come up with 4 requests, and the developer's going to meet all 4 of those requests, including staggering the renovictions, so that there's not as big of an impact to the community, as well as a variety of other packages that they're going to give to the tenants. So they've really come in a big way to help lessen the impact of these renovations.
Just a quick comment. I know this is a pretty pro-basketball town, and I congratulate the Rainmakers for their repeat on a second title. But Councillor Nice has been on the road quite a bit, and his daughter's going to be playing in 2 provincial championships.
We should actually say that the midget team has won the zones and is in the provincials, which is being hosted here. Is it this weekend also? So this weekend. So if anyone wants to see some midgets play some hockey, this is the weekend to watch it. And also, what Councillor Cunningham was referring to is the Pee Wee team has also made it to provincials and will be playing this weekend in Golden.
Oh, well, awesome. Any other reports from council? Okay, entertain a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Randhawa, second by Councillor Ady. All those in favor? Meeting's adjourned.